Good evening, I'm Nima Rajan, and this is Forum Daily for Wednesday, July 6th. Tonight, we begin in Brampton, Ontario, where Mayor Patrick Brown has been disqualified from running in the Conservative Party's leadership race. He is accusing the party brass of disqualifying him in order to benefit his rival, Pierre Poilievre. Last night, the Leadership Election Organizing Committee voted to disqualify Mayor Brown. This was based on what its chair said were serious allegations of wrongdoing. It's apparently related to an alleged breach of the financing rules in the Canada Elections Act, but the party is not offering any details. Mr. Poilievre's camp says the only people who know the true extent of what caused this disqualification are Patrick Brown and the committee. An emergency resolution brought before the AFN's annual meeting to reaffirm the suspension of its national chief has failed to pass. Roseanne Archibald expressed her gratitude for the decision to end what she called an unjust suspension as she sought to investigate alleged corruption. The resolution had said Ms. Archibald disclosed confidential information about staff complaints against her, but it failed to get the 60% of votes by eligible delegates needed for approval. Well, it looks like Air Canada took the top spot for flight delays for a fourth straight day in a survey by tracking service FlightAware. It says Canada's largest airline saw 65% of its flights arrive late yesterday. Air Canada's regional carrier Jazz Aviation was in second place, followed by Air Canada Rouge. FlightAware also says Toronto's Pearson International Airport was the sole airport across the globe to see more than half of its flight departures delayed yesterday. On the East Coast, Newfoundland and Labrador's health minister has been replaced. This comes following a report that showed nearly 25% of residents don't have a family doctor. Premier Andrew Furey announced this morning that Health Minister John Haggie and Education Minister Tom Osborne are switching roles effective immediately. Mr. Haggie is the past president of the Newfoundland and Labrador Medical Association and the Canadian Medical Association. A COVID-19 vaccine for Canada's youngest children could be approved as soon as this month. Health Canada tweeted yesterday that it expects to decide by mid-July on whether to approve Moderna's shot for children aged 6 months to 5 years. Moderna has applied for its vaccine to be given in 2 doses. Each dose is a quarter of its adult dose, and they are given about 4 weeks apart. The agency says it received Pfizer-BioNTech's submission on June 23rd for its children vaccine for 6 months to age 4 and is working out a timeline for the review. All right, turning to the Yukon, where wildfires are breaking out across the heat-scorched territory. Lightning strikes are blitzing the territory, sparking the fires as a heat wave drags on. Mike Fancy of Yukon Wildland Fire Management says about 20 fires a day have been sparked since Friday. He says the proportion of fires caused by lightning is stupendously high at 97%. This is compared with 70% in a typical year. Toronto's real estate market seems to have hit a speed bump. The Toronto Regional Real Estate Board says home sales dropped 41% in June compared with the same month last year. The board says there were just under 6,750 homes sold last month. This is down from just over 11,500 homes in June 2021. Some of the decrease is being attributed by the board to seasonal trends, and it says the numbers point to a continued market cool-down that will persist into the summer. June sales were also down compared to May. All right, moving to the drawn-out merger between media giants Rogers and Shaw, who continue to try to secure approval from Canada's competition watchdog. Both companies are working to highlight the benefits of their merger. This comes after 2 days of talks with the Competition Bureau failed to resolve the regulator's objections to it. The competition watchdog wants to block the merger on the grounds that consumers will end up with less choice and higher bills. The deal has been approved by shareholders and the CRTC, but it is still being reviewed by the Competition Bureau and the Minister of Innovation, Science and Economic Development. Well, we know pets were the go-to purchase during the pandemic as Manitobans were able to work from home. But as people return to their workplaces, too many of those adopted pets are also making their way back to animal shelters. The Winnipeg Humane Society says there were over 400 animals at the shelter, and finding them new homes is becoming more difficult. And it says it has a wait list for animals to be surrendered, which includes more than 120 cats and over 60 dogs. Up next, a look at airline delays and airport chaos. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after a short break. Air Canada and Toronto's Pearson Airport claimed the top spots for flight delays again on Tuesday. This marks at least 4 days in a row where the country's biggest airline has placed #1 of any large carrier worldwide. According to the tracking service FlightAware, Air Canada saw 65% of its flights arrive late. The tracking service says Jazz Aviation, which provides Air Canada regional service, and Air Canada Rouge took second and third place. Meanwhile, Toronto's Pearson Airport was the top spot for flight delays yesterday. And it was the only airport on the planet to see more than half of all departures delayed. Well, joining us now to unpack the situation is Mr. John Gradek, an aviation expert and faculty lecturer and coordinator of the Aviation Management Program at McGill University. Sir, welcome back to Forum Daily.
My pleasure to be here, Nima.
So what are the major factors behind airlines delaying flights these days?
Oh, it's staff. It's really a staffing issue and a competency issue. The staff that they currently have. The airlines have done a great job of hiring thousands of people over the last couple of months to basically fill the roles. So Air Canada's up to about 97% of its pre-COVID numbers. WestJet's hired, Transat has hired, everybody's hired. And so have the airports. But the issue that we're having at this point in time is that training, competency, efficiency. Are they able to really do the job that's being asked of them at the airport? And that's where the issue is right now.
And we mentioned that Toronto Pearson was the only airport in the world yesterday to have over half of all departures delayed. So what is the specific issue with this airport?
Well, I think it's a question of looking at the volume of flights that are being planned into Toronto Pearson Airport, into and out of Pearson. The airlines really have created themselves a bit of a quagmire by loading up the schedule the way they have. There's a lot of flights that were planned. Every flight's been sold out for months. And all those passengers are showing up at the airport, and there's just no room in terms of capacity for the airport to handle that volume of passengers.
And what do we know so far about the current state of airline delays at other major Canadian airports, sir?
The other, I think Montreal is a close second. Montreal Trudeau Airport is a close second to Pearson. I don't think it's as bad, but it's looking like it's a little more manageable. It's still midweek, so it'll get it might get a little worse on the weekend, which is when peak travel season starts up again. The weekends are bad. Friday, Saturday, Sundays, afternoon shift, evening shifts. Those are when most of the problems come to roost. Unfortunately, at Pearson, it's getting to be a full day's worth of delays. But hopefully that we're going to see this hopefully start to improve, but not much before August, September.
So can you walk us through the types of delays that travelers can face right now, and if they could maybe avoid or minimize the types of delays and lost luggage that we're seeing right now at airports?
The airport, the delays are getting primarily either cancellations that are happening. Air Canada is canceling on short notice, or flight delays that are progressive delays, we call them. And they're delays that basically are 3 or 4 or 5 times being delayed through an individual evening. And Air Canada has got what I call an aspirational schedule that basically says, well, we hope we'll be able to find an airplane to run this schedule, crossing our fingers that we do. And if we don't, please expect another delay. And so they really haven't got enough assets, in my opinion, particularly flying the long haul, flying the wide-bodied airplanes. Those airplanes are wound up pretty tight, and there's really no slack, and there's no spare airplanes around, backup airplanes around that could solve a problem. Particularly if you have a maintenance issue and there's a mechanical, you've got some major delays running here.
So what sort of rights do air passengers have when it comes to these delayed flights or lost luggage, sir? Just about a minute left here.
Yeah, I think there are regulations that said if the flight is delayed or canceled as a result of something within the control of the airline, there is compensation, and it's a compensation of $200, $400, or $700, depending on the delays. There's baggage compensation if they lose your bag, if your baggage is mangled. There is regulations in terms of how much you can claim for both damaged material as well as lost bags.
All right, it looks like we've got just about 30 seconds left here, but what sort of steps can our officials take to address or further address these issues?
Well, I think the Transport Canada and the Airport Authority really have got to put the pressure on the airlines, basically further rationalize their schedule. I think that there's still too many flights. There's still a lot more work that can be done to kind of reduce workload, reduce the flow of traffic. And yeah, you're going to have cancellations, unfortunately. But Air Canada's already started the ball rolling in those cancellations, and it's either canceling and redeploying people to other flights, or going through this mess and having it continue for another 4 or 5.
All right, Mr. Gradek, thank you again for a helpful interview.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Stay with us. We'll be right back after a short break on Forum Daily. The deaths of 53 migrants in an abandoned semi-truck in San Antonio, Texas last week is just one of many cases around the world where people who are looking for a better life for their families meet a bitter end. According to the migration data portal, since 2014, over 4,000 fatalities have been recorded on migratory routes worldwide. However, these numbers represent a minimum estimate, as most migrant deaths go unrecorded. To add to this, the global refugee crisis has seen 100 million people around the world being forced to flee their homes. This according to the UNHCR. Well, amid all this displacement, what role can Canada take to help? And is it realistic to think we can support these crises? Well, joining us now to talk more on Canada's role amid rising migration and refugee rates around the world is the Honourable Bob Rae, Canada's ambassador to the United Nations. Ambassador Rae, welcome back to Forum Daily.
Thank you so much. Good to be with you.
Good to see you again, sir. Now, I want to start off with a recent contribution you made in the Globe and Mail. In it, you spoke on the changing climate in the world and how the displacement of people may become the norm. So what sort of moral obligation does Canada have to help?
Well, I think the key word is help. We're not going to be able to solve the issue by ourselves. It's much bigger than us, but we have to be part of the solution. And I think that's where we have some real credibility in the past in helping to resolve conflicts, responding to climate change, and also showing that we're open to accepting people from around the world to become Canadian citizens, which is, I think, very much now part of Canada's whole approach to the global community, which I think is a very important example.
Now, we know the war in Ukraine is only adding to conflict seen around the world and the displacement of people. So is it realistic for Canada to play, as you say, a helping hand in all of these conflicts?
Well, and I don't only think it's not only realistic, Nima, I think it's also is essential. Stressing the point, the two-way point, really, that there's a lot more that we can do and need to do to make sure that our approach is generous and fair. And secondly, to reinforce for Canadians the fact that not all the solution involves Canada simply taking people in. It also involves finding solutions to the crisis. So we're trying to find a solution to the crisis in Ukraine, which has been caused by Russian aggression. And we have to keep trying to do that.
And to add to that, you mentioned in your post in the Globe and Mail that we have some important choices to make in shaping the future amid a world, as you say, is contested up for grabs. So what sorts of choices will we need to make in the near future?
Well, I think there's two. One of them is, are we prepared to remain committed to an open approach to both refugees and immigration? I think we should, personally. That's my view. I think most Canadians feel that way. Our record has been really quite extraordinary over the last 50 years in accepting people from around the world. But the second issue is this global crisis, which is climate change, COVID, conflict, is one that requires continuing participation and engagement by Canada, which frankly means money. We have to be prepared to really assist in the global effort to deal with the extent of this crisis.
And bringing this back home, we know Canada is a country that prides itself in its multiculturalism and many immigrant citizens. But what sort of role can migrants and refugees play in helping build our country?
Well, historically, they've played a very key role. We've made it a policy over the last several decades of accepting people. I can remember as a kid in school, when the first Hungarian refugees came out of the invasion of Russia against Hungary in 1956. I think all of us can remember well the Vietnamese boat crisis in the 1980s, when a conservative government actually led the way in seeing that 50,000 Vietnamese boat people were accepted in Canada. At the time, that seemed like an extraordinary effort, but frankly, it's come to be a tradition. The Syrian refugee situation, the current Afghan situation, the situation involving the Ukrainian people, we've responded well. And I think we need to keep responding well because it makes a huge difference to allowing our country to continue to grow and to succeed. All the evidence is that refugees, migrants, immigrants all play a key role in strengthening the fabric of Canada.
Ambassador Ray, thank you again for another important conversation.
Thank you so much, Nima. Good to be with you. Thank you. Good to talk.
Hope to see you again, sir. Thank you. All right, stay with us. We'll be right back after the break with a look at news from around the world. As a prosecutor in the U.S. says the Chicago 4th of July parade shooter confessed to the police. The British Prime Minister is vowing to remain on the job amid high-profile resignations, and EU lawmakers vote to consider natural gas and nuclear energy as sustainable activities. Stay with us. A prosecutor says the man charged with killing 7 people in an Independence Day parade in suburban Chicago has confessed to police. Robert Cremo made a court appearance this morning and was ordered held without bail. Lake County Assistant State's Attorney Ben Dillon says police found the shells of 83 bullets and 3 ammunition magazines on the rooftop the shooter fired from on Monday. In the UK, Prime Minister Boris Johnson's support within the Conservative Party is shrinking rapidly. But despite the resignations of 2 top cabinet ministers and several more junior officials, he is vowing to stay in power. Mr. Johnson is known for his uncanny ability to shrug off scandals, but a series of accusations of misdeeds have pushed him to the brink. Some of his fellow Conservatives now worry that a leader renowned for his affability could become a liability in elections. All right, well, meanwhile, European Union lawmakers have voted to include natural gas and nuclear in the bloc's list of sustainable activities. The European Commission earlier this year made the controversial proposal. This is part of its plans for building a climate-friendly future. But the plan divided member countries and sparked an outcry from environmentalists. They criticized the move as greenwashing. But EU legislators rejected an objection to the proposal in a vote today. The green labeling system from the European Commission defines what qualifies as an investment in sustainable energy. Moving to Nigeria now, where authorities have announced that the Secretary General of the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries has died. Nigerian native Mohammed Barkindo died late Tuesday. The cause of his death isn't immediately known. The 63-year-old led the Vienna-based crude oil bloc in August 2016. He saw the cartel through some of its most turbulent times, including the pandemic, when the oil price was hit with declining demand. Well, all of this comes as the country deals with a massive jailbreak in the capital of Abuja. A Nigerian official says nearly 900 inmates escaped. The permanent secretary of Nigeria's Ministry of Interior blamed the attack on Boko Haram, an extremist group in the country. The Islamist rebels have waged an insurgency in the country's northeast for over a decade. The insurgency is blamed for the deaths of more than 35,000 people. Turning to South Korea now, where the country's spy agency has filed charges against 2 of its former directors. This is over their handling of separate border incidents with North Korea in recent years, which prompted criticism that Seoul's previous liberal government improperly appeased the North to improve ties. The National Intelligence Service accused one former director of destroying intelligence reports, which were related to North Korea's fatal shooting of an unarmed South Korean citizen near the country's sea border in 2020. It says another former director forcibly closed an investigation into the circumstances surrounding the 2019 repatriation of 2 North Korean fishermen who were captured in South Korean waters and expressed a desire to defect. Hundreds of followers cheered as Tibetan spiritual leader the Dalai Lama marked his 87th birthday. He did so by opening a library and museum in his hillside Indian headquarters. The Dalai Lama Library and Museum contains artifacts, his teachings, and books on his life and struggle for Tibetan autonomy and protection of its native Buddhist culture. Meanwhile, 1 million Muslim pilgrims chosen through an online lottery system are arriving in Saudi Arabia's holy city of Mecca. This is for the largest Hajj since the pandemic started. But the numbers are still far fewer than the 2.5 million pilgrims who traveled from all over the world in 2019. They came for 5 intense days of worship and to carry out a series of rituals. Those performing the ritual this year must be under 65, vaccinated against the coronavirus, and have tested negative for COVID-19 within 72 hours of travel. Thousands of revelers have erupted in celebration as a firework blast started Pamplona's San Fermin running of the Bulls Festival. The festival was suspended for the past 2 years due to the coronavirus pandemic. With emotions running high, people dressed in white and red packed the town hall square for the noon event. And then they sprayed each other with red wine and Cava sparkling wine. The highlight of the 9-day festival is the early morning runs, in which thousands of people run crazily to avoid 6 bulls. This comes as they charge along a winding, cobblestoned route to the city's bull ring. All right, I'm Nima Rajan, and that'll do it for your look at national and international news for today. Remember, for more news on demand, you can always visit our website and make sure to follow us on our social media handles available on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. You can also watch all of our commentary, programming, and interviews on the News Forum YouTube channel. All right, I'm off to get married. We'll see you in a week, but be sure to tune into Forum Daily for the latest national and international news. Take care, Canada. I'll see you again.